At an altitude of over 17,000 feet, with wind speeds exceeding 630 kilometers per hour and a temperature of minus 17 degrees Celsius. The captain's body was hanging outside the aircraft from the waist up, his head repeatedly striking the fuselage, while his crew held onto his legs with everything they had for 22 straight minutes. And the strangest part? He survived. And just months later, he was back in the cockpit. June 10, 1990. A British domestic flight from Birmingham to Malaga, Spain, aboard a BAC 1-11 aircraft. The plane climbs normally to its cruising altitude. Everything appears completely routine. But weeks earlier, during a routine maintenance check, the cockpit's front windscreen had been replaced, using bolts that were slightly smaller than required. A small, invisible error. Nobody caught it. Now, at an altitude above 17,000 feet, the massive pressure difference between the inside and outside of the aircraft did what that tiny error made possible. The entire front windscreen blew out in a fraction of a second. The resulting suction force was so violent it physically pulled the captain out of his seat, forcing his upper body through the opening and outside the aircraft. Only his legs remained caught inside the cockpit. The co-pilot, almost entirely alone, seized the flight controls, while freezing wind and sub-zero temperatures tore directly into his face through the open windscreen. A flight attendant rushed into the cockpit and grabbed the captain's legs, holding on with all his strength to stop him from sliding completely outside and falling from a lethal altitude. The problem was, the captain's body kept slamming against the side of the fuselage from the force of the airflow, and for several critical minutes, the crew believed he was already dead. Despite the chaos, the deafening noise, and the brutal cold inside the cockpit, the co-pilot managed to gradually descend the aircraft and stabilize it enough to attempt an emergency landing at the nearest available airport. Cabin crew took turns holding the captain's legs for over 20 minutes straight, terrified that losing their grip for even a second would mean losing him entirely. The aircraft finally landed safely at Southampton Airport, leaving emergency responders stunned. They had braced for the worst possible outcome. And the real surprise: the captain was still alive. He suffered fractures, severe frostbite, and facial trauma, but he survived an incident that, by all logic, should have been fatal within its first few seconds. Months later, after treatment and recovery, that same captain returned to the cockpit and flew again. A handful of undersized bolts changed the fate of an entire flight in a split second. But what ultimately saved the captain wasn't luck alone. It was a co-pilot's split-second decision and a grip that never let go for over 20 minutes. Sometimes, the line between catastrophe and a legendary story of survival comes down to just a few minutes. Would you have made the same call? Let me know in the comments, and follow for more stories the history books forgot.